Welcome to the Free Thinkers International podcast. Here you can listen to the latest articles published on freethinkersinternational.net. Subscribe now and never miss an episode. Want to hear your story or article featured? Share it on our website, and who knows, our listeners might enjoy your story soon. I'm Sound of Liberty. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Young people dying by suicide. Young people are particularly vulnerable. They live under unique pressures that amplify their mental health struggles. Academic stress, the relentless comparison on social media, economic uncertainty, and the quest for identity and acceptance. For many, these pressures combine, creating a level of mental strain they feel unable to handle alone. Social media, though meant to connect, often amplifies feelings of inadequacy, as young people constantly compare their lives to idealized images. Economic and academic pressures make the future feel overwhelming. In an already challenging period of life, these burdens often become unbearable. Without adequate support, many young people see no way out, resorting to self-harm or even attempting suicide. The sheer scale of suicide attempts, 16 million per year, reveals not just individual pain, but a collective crisis. It is a reflection of our society's struggle to provide meaningful support to those in need. Like other tragic periods in history, where preventable deaths spiraled out of control, the current suicide epidemic highlights a failure to protect vulnerable individuals. Society has a responsibility to foster hope and resilience, especially among its youth. Addressing this crisis demands a rethinking of mental health care, a commitment to eliminating stigma, and the creation of safe spaces where people feel valued and understood. Stigma, general, religious, cultural. Mental illness remains deeply stigmatized around the world, affecting not only those who suffer, but also those close to them. This stigma creates a cycle of silence and neglect, making it harder for people to seek help and for society to provide the support needed. Stigma around mental illness comes in various forms: general societal stigma, religious stigma, and cultural stigma. Mentally ill people are frequently rejected by society, largely because of persistent misconceptions and deeply ingrained fears. People with mental health issues are unpredictable, lack empathy, and are inherently challenging to interact with, which leads others to avoid them or treat them as fundamentally different. These facts create a barrier of misunderstanding and stigma, fueling the perception that mental illnesses make individuals unreliable, unsafe, or unable to form meaningful relationships. Consequently, people with mental health issues often face isolation, exclusion, and a lack of support from their communities, which only deepens their struggles and perpetuates the cycle of stigma. Worldwide mental health crisis and war zone displacement. In conflict zones and among displaced populations, the mental health crisis is profound and persistent. People living in these environments face relentless exposure to violence, instability, and loss, creating a backdrop of trauma that touches nearly everyone. War and conflict bring about multiple layers of suffering: bombings, attacks, forced separations, and the destruction of homes and communities. For those who are displaced, the journey often involves a series of additional hardships, including dangerous travel, exposure to exploitation, and prolonged uncertainty about the future. The mental health impact of these experiences is staggering. Anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD) are among the most common mental health issues faced by conflict-affected and displaced populations. Children are particularly vulnerable. Many young people in these situations witness extreme violence, lose family members, or are separated from their parents. This exposure can deeply affect their development, leading to behavioral problems, nightmares, and withdrawal. For adults, the ongoing stress often manifests as anxiety, despair, and a sense of hopelessness. Displaced individuals who have endured such trauma struggle with profound feelings of loss of loved ones, homes, and identities tied to their native lands. The need for mental health care in these populations is critical, as untreated trauma can last a lifetime and impact future generations. Conflict zones and displacements like religion and truth. Despite these overwhelming need, mental health resources in conflict zones and among displaced populations are incredibly limited. Humanitarian aid often prioritizes immediate physical needs, such as food, water, shelter, and medical care. These essentials are crucial, but mental health care is often seen as secondary or optional. The lack of funding for mental health services is a significant obstacle. Many humanitarian organizations operate on limited budgets and have to make difficult decisions about resource allocation. As a result, mental health services are often underfunded, if not entirely absent, from relief efforts. Even in cases where mental health programs are included, the resources may not be adequate to meet the vast demand. Psychiatry as available as a luxurious car. Cultural stigma around mental health issues also impacts access to care. In some cultures, mental health struggles may be seen as a weakness or something that should be handled privately. In conflict zones, people may prioritize physical survival over addressing mental health, viewing psychological help as a luxury they cannot afford. This perception limits the effectiveness of mental health programs and reduces the likelihood that people will seek help, even when services are available. The consequences of untreated mental health issues in these populations are far reaching. Traumatized individuals are more likely to struggle with social integration, forming trusting relationships and achieving stability, which can lead to social isolation and further hardship. For children, untreated trauma can interfere with their education, social skills, and overall development, affecting their futures. Communities that have endured conflict often experience long-term social and economic challenges, as the trauma can inhibit people's ability to work, collaborate, or rebuild. Untreated mental health issues in these settings don't just affect individuals, they hinder the recovery and resilience of entire communities. General stigma. General stigma around mental illness is pervasive, influencing attitudes across different demographics and cultures. People often view mental illness through a lens of misunderstanding, fear, or judgment. This stigma often stems from a lack of education about mental health and mental illnesses. For example, people might mistakenly believe that mental illnesses are signs of personal weakness, laziness, or moral failings. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia are often misunderstood, leading to damaging stereotypes. In workplaces, schools, and public spaces, people with mental health issues are sometimes seen as unreliable, unpredictable, or even dangerous. These assumptions limit their opportunities and isolate them from support. Studies show that individuals with mental health issues face higher rates of unemployment and discrimination in hiring practices. Co-workers may isolate them. This general societal stigma discourages people from openly discussing their struggles or seeking professional help, fearing they will be judged or ostracized. Media also plays a role in reinforcing stigma. Films, news stories, and social media often portray people with mental health issues in a negative light, associating mental illness with violence, unpredictability, and incompetence. This further reinforces harmful stereotypes and fears, making it difficult for society to view mental health issues with empathy and understanding. Worldwide mental health crisis, religion and stigma. Religious stigma around mental illness varies widely depending on the religious context, but it often portrays mental health struggles as moral or spiritual failings. In some religious beliefs, mental illness may be seen as a punishment for sins, evidence of weak faith, or the result of demonic possession or spiritual contamination. For instance, some communities might interpret depression as a failure to trust in a higher power, while psychotic episodes could be mistaken for spiritual possession. This misunderstanding can lead individuals to avoid medical treatment and instead rely on prayer or religious rituals as their only cure. In such cases, religious leaders may discourage people from seeking professional help, urging them to turn to prayer, repentance, or purification instead. This view prevents individuals from receiving the mental health care they need and creates a sense of guilt and shame, as they may feel they are personally responsible for their suffering. Religious stigma is particularly common in traditional or conservative communities where faith is central to daily life. Here, mental illness may be viewed as a personal failing or an indication that an individual has distanced themselves from their religious duties. Moreover, some religious communities are reluctant to acknowledge mental illnesses because it challenges their beliefs in divine protection and moral purity. For example, members of a religious group may see mental health struggles as inconsistent with a virtuous or pious life. This can lead to shunning, isolation, or even expulsion from the community, deepening the individual's suffering and sense of isolation. Cultural stigma. The cultural stigma around mental health differs across societies, but is universally harmful. In some cultures, mental illness is seen as a source of family shame, leading to secrecy and denial. Family members may refuse to acknowledge a relative's mental health struggles out of fear that the family's reputation will be damaged. In societies where collective honor is a priority, the actions and conditions of an individual reflect on the entire family. Families may go to great lengths to hide mental illness, sometimes isolating or even institutionalizing the affected family member to avoid societal judgment. There was a report on a young Italian mobster suffering from mental illness. Unsure whether to visit a psychiatrist, he thought his father would have killed him if he had visited a psychiatrist. In Asian cultures, for instance, there can be a cultural pressure to avoid discussing mental health struggles openly. People may avoid seeking help because of the concept of faith or social respectability, which dictates that one's personal struggles should not be publicly visible. In Japan, for example, mental health issues are often concealed to avoid shaming oneself and one's family. Similarly, in South Asian cultures, mental illness is frequently kept private, and those who seek treatment might be labeled as weak or unstable. Witchcraft and mental illness. In many African cultures, mental illness is often associated with supernatural beliefs or witchcraft, leading to severe stigmatization. Mental health issues are sometimes attributed to curses, evil spirits, or sorcery. People with mental illness may be viewed as dangerous or possessed and treated accordingly. Families may abandon individuals with mental health conditions, fearing that their condition will bring misfortune or bad luck to the household. In some cases, communities even resort to exorcisms or other harmful traditional practices rather than seeking professional treatment. Indigenous cultures may also face unique stigmas around mental health. For many indigenous people, mental health struggles are closely linked to historical trauma, colonization, and displacement. These communities experience high rates of mental health issues, yet stigma around discussing or addressing mental health remains strong. For example, in some Native American communities, mental health problems are seen as shameful or as a sign of weakness, preventing individuals from seeking help. The impact of stigma on treatment and support. The combined effects of societal, religious, and cultural stigma have a profound impact on how individuals experience mental illness. These forms of stigma create barriers to treatment, isolate people from their communities, and often worsen their symptoms. Many individuals delay or completely avoid seeking help due to fear of judgment or discrimination. This reluctance not only prolongs their suffering, but can also lead to severe, untreated mental health conditions that become harder to manage over time. Stigma also affects healthcare providers. In many regions, general practitioners may have limited training in mental health, or they may themselves hold stigmatized views toward mental illness. This results in substandard care, where patients might not receive adequate treatment or compassionate support. When mental health issues are seen as less important than physical health, they are often underfunded and understaffed. Hospitals and clinics may lack the necessary resources to support mental health, leading to long wait times and limited access to qualified professionals. Thank you for tuning into the Freethinkers International podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Remember, you can explore more thought-provoking articles and stories on freethinkersinternational.net. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an update. Got a story to share? Publish it on our website and your voice could be featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay free. Bye-bye.